Okay guys, we're gonna get started. We have Curtis Tran. Curtis can come. Yeah, clap for Curtis. So I'm gonna let Curtis introduce himself, but I will say he's been an excellent member of our community. Curtis meets with us once a month and sets up shop at the CU and does office hours for financial assistance to our artists. So if you're a member, that's something you can take a part in. It's free, it's open to any current member, and then if you're not a member, maybe it's a reason to become a member. I'm gonna let Curtis introduce himself. He said he's gonna pace around a little bit, so I'll try to track him with the camera, but Curtis, it's all yours.
Okay, perfect. Well, thank you guys so much for hanging out with me and taking the time of on a Thursday. For many, this is the weekend, so I'm gonna treat it like you guys are with me after hours, right? So thank you so much. I want to instill a few things in every single one of you that what I quickly find in many people in my industry is that they do not take artists seriously. They do not think that, like, hey, I have a hobby to be photography, painting, or so on, that I should be taken seriously as maybe as these tech or AI people. Absolutely not. It is your life, it's your dreams, your passion. Let's get you there. And absolutely, you can make your entire career and fund your mortgage and have kids and so on and fund it through art. Absolutely, you can. And let's go and start the conversation with that. Taylor, press next. So, disclaimer today, I'm ultimately just a financial advisor. All the materials today are purely just educational. I'm ultimately not a CPA or an attorney. If any of these questions or anything that may come up prompts those kind of questions, then I will quickly refer you to them and so on. But also today is just more general advice. If you have any questions and want to have a little bit more one-on-one scenario, you're free to schedule a time with me and so on. Let's go on the next slide. Okay, let's talk about a little bit of overview for just the next hour or so. We're gonna be talking a little bit about mind shifts, taxes, business structure, who should be in your team, banking, and then advising. So, if you have ever received money for your business, period, you are a small business owner. And with that, I wanna ask a few questions. What are the kind of artists that we have here? I would love to ask every single one of you, what is your name? What is your artistry? What is your passion? Can I start with you? Nice, okay. So first of all, what I love about Cedars Union is that there's all these different multitudes of different artists, different disciplinaries. And if I were to ask to raise your hand if you're just an artist, all of you would. But my next question is, can you please raise your hand if you've ever received money, period, at all, for Zelle, Apple, Pay, so on? Okay, that's mostly everyone. So you are all small business owners, right? So when I talk about taxes, let me also mention, whenever I show these numbers here, don't pay attention with a really big, scary IRS picture, right? But 7.65, does that number seem familiar at all to any of you? I'm not gonna ask the banker. Okay. How does that seem familiar to you, sir?
I mean, you've seen it on a W-2.
Okay. Yeah. Absolutely. So when you say you see it on W-2, like, what do you mean?
Like on tax forms, yeah.
Okay.
It's like one tax line. I saw mine yesterday. So
yeah. Okay. It is tax season. Please check out your W-2s, so on. Please send it to your CPAs, so on. But 15.3, does that seem familiar to anyone here?
I don't remember that one, no.
Okay. Does anyone see how similar these numbers are? How are they similar?
It's half. One's half of the other.
There you go. One's doubled. So for here, whenever I talk to people about, in general, I always will tell people that I'm going to talk to you about taxes. I freaking love taxes. And they're like, ugh, okay, it's scary. It's like, yeah, it is scary. But man, the thing is that if you're a small business owner, 7.65 is what you pay as the employee. I have worked at Chick-fil-A, I was a server, I was a tour guide, I worked in private real estate and so on. I saw this number 7.65 everywhere I went because I was always the employee, which means that every time that I was paying, I had to pay 6.2% in Social Security, 1.45% towards Medicare. So that's what that 7.65 comes from. But I mentioned as the employee. I also agree that almost every one of you are small business owners. So you may quickly become familiar with 15.3. So what I want you to understand that every time that you look at your paychecks, your W-2s and so on, you're seeing the number 7.65. Well, that's because you're paying that as an employee, but whenever you become the employee and the employer, that's when things get doubled. I will say you are able to see some deductions or so on for paying self-employment tax and whatever, but we're not even having a discussion of income tax planning at all. So this is the first level, and then we'll add income taxes. And it's like, oh my gosh, I got to pay all this taxes towards the IRS? Absolutely. Yes, you will. That's how I always say that you know you're doing a great job and just how much that big bill is going to be from Uncle Sam. Does anyone have any questions on this? Okay. So, deductions, credits. Typically what I find whenever I'm advising some of the different artists here at Cedars Union, that one of the first questions is like, man, I want to do tax write-offs, I want to do all this and so on. It's like, okay, sure. Deductions, credits, absolutely. Let's get you them. Let's talk to you about that. Ultimately, these are the fun questions you should be asking your CPAs, your bookkeepers, or so on. I point you in a very good general direction, but even if I were to have all the licenses as an advisor, I can only take you so far, so please contact your CPAs. But whenever you report them to the IRS, and if the IRS says yes, you can deduct that or so on, well, it has to be ordinary, necessary, and reasonable. So for here, I have a few sculptors. Who are the sculptors? Can I have you raise your hand? Okay, perfect. Can you tell me a little bit more about like what are the things that you buy or so on to sculpt?
Lots of materials.
Okay.
Anything from wood, metal, ridiculously expensive clays.
Yeah. Okay, perfect. Is there anything specific that like the woods, the metals, they come and go, but is there anything specific that stays with you, like maybe like an asset, a capital asset?
Oh yeah, investments for sure. Like tools.
Okay.
For sure. There's also labor for sometimes doing large stuff. You get
Sure.
assistants or fabricators. You hire them.
Absolutely.
In terms of something that's repeatable, there's consumables.
Absolutely.
All the time. Saw blades and stuff like that.
Yeah. There you go. Okay. And then so the reason why I mentioned that is that there's expenses, and then we also want to mention there's like depreciable expenses as well. So what's important that for you, sir, like whenever you're buying the woods, the metals, and so on, then yes, if you do it properly and so on, then yes, they are tax write-offs, they are expenses towards your business. It's ordinary, you are a sculptor. We understand that. It's necessary, you need those expenses to be able to just sculpt. It's reasonable because we understand that you are just a sculptor. But let's say if you bought like a random disco ball in your studio and they just, like the IRS just could not fathom and understand, hey, like, okay, we know you sculpt, but I don't know how having a disco ball helps you sculpt. Then that becomes a very different conversation. The reason why that becomes important, because I've seen people being like, oh, I have this fitness trainer, they're making me healthier, and ultimately that affects my mind, and I can ultimately be a better sculptor. That's not ordinary or necessarily reasonable for you and just your business. And so we always want to say that what are your personal expenses and then what are your business expenses, right? And so that's what we mentioned with deductions and credits. What's that?
Would utilities count towards that?
What was that?
Would utilities count towards this? Like electricity and water if you're working with like clay or stuff?
Yes, so those are definitely business expenses, but in terms of utilities, that definitely points me back to going towards the CPA. So let's say like a good interesting thing is like could be like home studios. Yeah. So I actually did advise that, hey, I have this painter that I work with, and she told me that, okay, I'm building this whole scaffold and so on, and this entire area is dedicated only for the studio. I was like, okay, well that's interesting because you can't necessarily deduct your home as purely as like a business expense per se, but if you're dedicating a specific area, then yes, we can entertain that. We can look at square footage or so on, but obviously those are answers and questions for your CPA at that point. Electricity and water, I'm not sure on the top of my head, but I will say that's kind of goes back to like, is your studio, is your aerospace even am seen to the IRS as a business expense in the first place? Are there any other questions? Okay, perfect. Okay, so my friends, this is a big, scary chart. This is when I started walking around because, man, this is a bunch of stuff to read. I was trying to find the chart that I really liked the most. I was like, man, let me just go into ChatGPT and just build one out. So this is one of the biggest questions that I find as well is specific business entities. Obviously, on the left side is going to be features, sole proprietorship, LLC, partnership, and corporations. Those are the main 4 types that we're going to be looking at. You also hear C Corp, S Corp, and so on. But with that, this is what we really entertain when it comes to just becoming a business owner. There are different sections of who owns it, easy setup, liability protection, startup costs, ongoing costs, tax treatment, best for. In my time with the Cedars Union artists, for some reason, we're all there. Everyone's asking about corporations, C Corp, S Corp. That does not, in my opinion, make that much sense until you make $50K or more. And why so? I mean, there you go, double taxation. There you go. Come on now. And so until we get to that point, we would then advise you, okay, well, let's talk about it. LLC, that is my big fan favorite, limited liability corporation. Can anyone give me a reason why you'd even entertain, like, ultimately right now, if you've just received money, yes, you are a small business owner. If you've not done anything specific, you're seen as sole proprietor. But can anyone give me a reason why you'd even entertain going anywhere else?
You get sued.
Okay.
And if you're a sole proprietor, then you as a person are getting sued. But if you have an LLC, then it's like technically your LLC is getting sued.
Sure.
So that's separate from you as an individual, I guess.
Sure.
That's one way I've heard it explained. But
Yeah.
I don't know if that's exactly correct.
Absolutely. Anything else?
I was going to say, when your work is entering public spaces or the public is involved in any point, I think at that point that's when I start considering, and I've been considering getting an LLC for a little bit, and just purely for that. Just as this Sarah was saying earlier, it's a way to protect you if you get sued, but it also kind of protects your assets and keeps it as a separate thing outside of the things.
There you go. Okay, yes, that's great. Anything else? Okay, you guys, I love that. Those are great and amazing answers. Yes. So as soon as you entertain anything else beyond sole proprietorship, you're essentially creating a structure that adds limited liability. Obviously, when it comes to who owns it or so on, in terms of the different shareholders, you can have 2 or more. You can have, like, there are some entities that have hundreds or so on. I mean, for corporations, that's what you typically think of, just big firms like maybe McDonald's or Kroger, where there's all these different shareholders. They're a public company. But man, and honestly, I can tell you right now, if all the Cedars Union artists, I've really told them, man, I really just want you to look at LLC. I will tell you when you need to entertain anything else. Partnership may be interesting, but I've yet to find an artist where it's like, okay, I'm going to only exist with John Doe, it's Curtis and John, and we're going to do paintings and so on. I haven't found that just yet. So LLC just makes sense so far, right? And like you guys were able to mention, just want to reverberate back that in the event that you get sued, you can get sued for all the different multitudes of reasons, defamation, maybe someone gets injured at your work or at your studio or so on. Then yes, if they sue you, well, they're suing you, or they're suing the LLC. So ultimately, that does not affect if, like, let's say if they were to come for XYZ, they will come for your business assets. We already mentioned for you that, hey, like, we might have these business expenses, these materials or supplies, and all these different assets. But man, if they're really only for my sculpting business, it's really the only thing they can come for versus my home, my mortgage, my 401k, and so on. That's a very different conversation. So that's why we always want to say, you're creating basically some sort of segmentation between these. Does anyone have any questions on this?
I would just say you're not automatically a sole proprietor, and there is a small startup cost because you do need to go to your local county and file an assumed name certificate, which probably costs $20 to become a doing business
Yeah.
as.
There you go.
You're doing business as, solo art or whatever.
Yes.
it might be.
Absolutely.
It doesn't mean you're limited liability, but you actually then are a sole proprietor, and that's when you report certain things on your taxes, and then your CPA will tell you based on your standard deduction whether all of these materials should be deducted separately. If your standard deduction is higher than your individual pieces that you can deduct, like the tools you're talking about, if your standard deduction is 16,000, but what you deduct for your business is 10, go for a standard deduction because that's a larger deduction than your tools.
Absolutely.
You should file with DBA. There's a small startup.
Yeah, absolutely. So there you go. It always helps to have just more than one person in the community, right? So thank you so much to our banker. And so with that, absolutely. Taylor, let's go to the next spot. So who is your team? Well, I think the only person we recognize so far is just, this handsome gentleman right here, the financial advisor. Man. But everyone else, man, these are just portraits I took from Canva and so on. Hopefully none of them were AI generated, I'm not too sure. But am I saying that once you're creating LLCs and so on, am I saying you necessarily need all of these people from day one? Absolutely not. I'm just letting you know these are people that you should just become familiar with. And if you have any questions, man, you got people like me, Taylor, a banker in the room, and so on that can point you in those directions. But with that, I also want to decipher what each of them do. So CPA, that's what you're thinking of in terms of deductions, credits, who's helping you file your taxes, and so on. That's your CPA. You'll give them the homework by the year by year. And so it's not always a guarantee that if your CPA will do business consulting and so on. But man, your CPAs will take you pretty far. Financial advisor, that's obviously where I'm looking at, and I'm essentially being a consultant. I'm seeing your cash flow, and I'm seeing, what can we do with that? Your banker, obviously, this is in the conversation, man, you're having your personal finances, your business finances, your banker will help navigate that. An SBA lender, typically your banker and SBA lender can be the same person. But with an SBA lender, a small business administration lender, this can be very, very lucrative in terms of, let's say I needed funding or so on. I actually had a conversation last week about someone that said like, hey, I want to get a brick and mortar shop and do karaoke. And I was like, man, I can talk about this, but man, I'm Filipino, and I see like in Lubbock, Texas, like there needs to be a Filipino karaoke spot. I was like, okay, that's awesome, man. Like, let's freaking do it. And I asked him, like, well, what assets do you have to your name and so on? I was like, well, not too much, man. I'm in tech, but I don't know where to go from there. It's like, well, you might have to talk to an SBA lender at that point to get funding, to even have the brick and mortar, to get all the materials and so on. An SBA lender can have that conversation. The reason why you might talk to an SBA lender versus a banker, bankers are great for just, you already have assets to your name, but an SBA lender can be great in terms of you're starting for the very first time. Am I doing okay? Okay, perfect. I'm getting now so far, okay. Okay, litigator. We always say that for a litigator, it's just important to have someone like that in your life that is ready to defend you at any point and notice. And so just having a litigator in your life, man, like I said, whenever it becomes to you just being a business, you have people that may trip or fall or someone just in your studio space and so on. If they come for your business, man, you might need a litigator to help navigate through that process with you. Your bookkeeper is an individual that is going to be helping you navigate through your day-to-day, your weekly expenses, and so on, making sure that your cash flow is just doing fine and dandy. Obviously, I typically find that artists are really great at what they do. They're really great at their artistry. But man, just logging all the expenses and so on, man, that can be really hard. Yes, you can hypothetically just get QuickBooks or so on. You can try to do it yourself, but having a bookkeeper will save you a lot of hassle and not make your CPA be so mad at you when it comes to tax season. Business attorney. Business attorney is someone that can help navigate that process in terms of, man, I want to create 501c3 or so on. So actually, fun fact for us is that if you guys are familiar with it, but I'm actually on the board for Art Boost. And right now we're talking to business attorneys right now because we've had to separate, and now we're talking about basically creating a 501c3 process, and they're helping us navigate that conversation, right? And so for a business attorney, man, they'll just help you navigate all that legal stuff. Fellow artists, you can't do it all by yourself. Have people around you. And that's something that I absolutely love about a Cedars Union is that, man, you look at all the different artists and so on, man, they do their individual works. They'll have their solo exhibition shows. I think there's actually one today. But what's awesome is that, man, they're supporting each other. I always say that for me, as an advisor, it can very much so quickly become a very, very lonely profession. Because with other advisors, it's like, man, I want John Doe. It's like, no, I want John Doe because, man, he likes me more, or so on, and then becomes competition, right? Absolutely not. For a fellow artist, you can't make the same arguments, like, oh, maybe they like my art more versus mine. I want to just preface by this part, man, if you're just building a great community, if you're being a little bit intentional, you don't know how many of these people can save you right now. And so for me, being a financial advisor, we'll actually go to the next slide, Taylor. In terms of just advising, so these are just some of the different things that I intimately help with, right? And so I quickly just send a lot of my work to CPAs, to business attorneys before I even do any work or so on. But a great example of what I do, I mentioned to you guys about deductions and credits. So what's interesting is that when you're working in these corporate jobs and you're getting that stable income, but then if you become a full business, you're by yourself or so on, it's like, man, I don't really got a 401k anymore. I don't have, like, all my money has to go back into the business. It's like, I don't know how to really do any of that. So something that I help with and something I do all day and every day is something called a SEP IRA or so on. Whereas like, hey, before I was getting all these deductions, reducing my taxable income with traditional 401ks or so on. But man, you could do that by yourself as a small business owner as well. And so SEP IRA, solo 401ks are conversations that we can have as well. And then this is just the very, very broad stuff. If I were to tell you every single product that I can do, we'd be here for another 30 minutes. But for this, these are the conversations that I intimately help with. Is there any questions about any of this?
So on your team page,
Yep. Can we go back a page?
what about adding your insurance agent? And I know
Property casualty.
I know you have different insurance
Mhm.
you can help with as far as like life and
Mhm.
but like property casualty, business insurance, I think that's a good team member to put on that.
Yeah, absolutely. No, so property and casualty. So what our friend here is talking about is that actually, Taylor, can we go back a few slides and go back to, yes, okay, go one. So personal liability protection. So this is what our friend is talking about here. So personal liability protection, whenever you're having all this stuff here and you're having all this conversations about like, hey, how much liability am I sharing or so on, basically a property casualty insurance, think about assets and insuring those. And everyone here should already be doing work with some sort of property and casualty person. Why? Because you guys got cars. In auto insurance, man, that's a great example. But when it comes to even having your business or so on, like a great example with Art Boost, we had a conversation with a property and casualty person, and we were talking, it's like, hey, do we need this coverage, or we have just a conference at this one specific time of year. I think we're looking for September or so on for this year. But man, it's like, do we need some sort of liability insurance that exists at all times? Like, well, like you might just need one big giant event insurance because that's when everyone comes in. So property and casualty insurance is really, really important in terms of like, man, you guys, people have walking around your sculptures or so on. They're looking at all your different materials. Let's make sure that in the event that if you were to ever get sued, man, you got some liability insurance is going to be helping back you up in that. So property and casualty agents are pretty fun. They're awesome. And so yes, I do insurance, but for this, it doesn't really make sense to talk about insurance too much, unless we're talking about SBA lenders. That might come up. But for here, yeah, property and casualty insurance, we're already mentioning here for all these different entities. Yeah, that's going to be pretty important. Okay? So with that, I didn't want to make today super heavy in different charts or numbers or so on. So what I did is, like, if you wanted to know a little bit more about me, this is a QR code to my website. But here's what I wanted to really emphasize more. We're here at the Cedars Union, a great nonprofit, 501c3 nonprofit, but a lot of people, when they typically come to me and talk to me about like, hey Curtis, how do I just grow my money and so on? And I was like, well, unless you're talking to me about like investments or stocks or so on, like, yes, we can have that conversation. But in terms of like, hey, how do I write grants? How do I get exhibitions or so on? Man, we're at the place that nurtures and fosters those kinds of relationships. And so if you ever have any questions about just growing your artistry and so on, I will say for me, I'm really good at just making you keep your money and or helping it grow and compound, right? But when it comes to growing or so on, that's where I would say like leverage your community artists around you. You have people like Danielle, Taylor, MS. Well, and Jennifer here, who's on the board, that man, Cedars Union will take you pretty far. And I can tell you right now from all the artists that I've been speaking to, so a little spiel for the Cedars Union artists is that, man, there is just a level of success that exists within these walls that I just cannot explain. I have met a few people that have either gotten laid off or they're entertaining either going towards just full-time, just into their business. But man, the success that just exists in these four walls is unparamounted versus the other artists I might be interacting with. So I'm very proud that we're meeting here and we're having the conversations here today. I didn't want to make today too long, so you can guys ask me some of your questions. And with that, that's pretty much all I got for you. All right, what questions do you guys have?
So as we're entering tax season, I
Hmm?
know that there are a lot of different tax options. Not everyone is familiar with, like, everyone knows like TurboTax and like different
Sure.
options. But as artists, our situation is a little different. Do you have recommended spaces to kind of do our taxes with someone, or how would we do it on our own?
Sure. So you can ask Taylor and the Cedars Union crew, but I do have a pretty extensive network that I can easily refer you to. It's, there's like 5 or 6 different CPAs and tax people that I network with all the time. But in terms of, like, let's say if you're just starting, I wouldn't say that necessarily that you might have necessarily the needs of just like, I need to talk to a CPA, because in all honesty, the cheapest CPA that I know, man, they'll do it for you for like $500. And that's cheap. That's super cheap. If anything, standard is $1,000. So I want you guys to bear that in mind. So, but thankfully my CPAs, if I'm just like, hey, like just talk to them, they'll quickly tell you, like, man, you don't need to use me. You can go to TurboTax or something. And so there are a lot of really great websites. What I would love for everyone to do is go to the IRS website and see free tax filing. Free tax filing IRS website. They will help navigate you to some really great resources through there. So I always say the IRS is really big and scary and so on, but man, if you can think about how they think and the resources that they have, they're a pretty reliable resource. So as much as I talk to people about how you don't give Uncle Sam a tip, man, we use a lot of their resources. Does that answer your question, Laylee?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay.
Because I personally, when I've used TurboTax, I always feel a little gross, like they're
Yeah.
taking your money, and a lot of the times I don't necessarily qualify for like some of the free options.
Sure.
To like get some of the different options. It's like, oh well, you can't file with those things because without paying us more. So
Yeah.
I just kind of wanted to get your insights of it.
Yeah, absolutely. And so when it comes to that with TurboTax, I'm a little bit iffy from just like referring them just in general, just because they're known as the free tax filers, right? But like you've seen from your experience, I don't really find with a lot of my clients that they find it to be a free experience. There's typically a cost somewhere in there. And you just add like one extra document or so on, like you're paying for medical insurance or whatever, then it'll be like, hey, you got to pay $50 or $70. And so TurboTax is a great resource, but I always tell them, do not think it's free. Do not think it's free whatsoever. There's a cost somewhere. Anything else?
So, for structuring the business,
Mhm.
if you're running it from your home, right now I have it set up in my garage.
Okay.
How do you separate the property, or can you even separate your personal property from your business in that situation to an LLC?
I would then advise you to either talk to a CPA. I don't think that really prompts an EA, which is what we call an enrolled agent. But basically, you talk to a CPA for that, and I refer one to you about like how do I just document that this space is specifically for my business.
Yeah.
Like like if your parking cars are there and it's your personal car, then that kind of defeats like, okay, this is not the business space. It's now like mixed use at that point. But another person to think about, like I mentioned with the EAs, enrolled agents. So hopefully you guys will never need to entertain this conversation, but a conversation I'm having right now is that I have this lovely pair of clients, and they're awesome, and I adore them and so on. But man, like I'm not doing much work with them. Why? Because they have a $50,000 tax bill from the IRS right now, and so the EA, the enrolled agent, what he's doing is that he's going to the IRS and speaking on their behalf, basically acting like an attorney or so on, and basically just putting them on a payment plan. I don't think that props an EA, but if it becomes to where it's like you need someone to just talk to the IRS for you, then an EA might come up. I'm not saying like you're gonna have a huge tax bill like my clients are, but man, like it just an enrolled agent might be applicable somewhere in that journey. So?
It's like, well, I thought it was, the rule of thumb, like, I work from home as well.
Sure.
And I believe the deduction is like 25% because of your cost of lighting, electricity, water, the lease of that 25% of the space that you are leasing, otherwise known as my apartment. But I thought that was all, that those were all deductions, no? I could,
Especially if it's an apartment, like do you own the apartment?
no.
Okay, then for that, that's gonna be really hard to basically get proven to the IRS that like, hey, this property that's owned by someone else is like this specific studio space. And so I would say like, you need to talk to a CPA about whether or not like, if there's any way, like especially like, I actually had everyone say their name and profession. What is your name and what do you do?
Oh, Amy, I'm an artist.
Amy, okay. What is your disciplinary?
Painting.
Painting, okay. Okay, so like if there's like I mentioned to this gentleman, like if there's a specific area that's only for painting, and you can very much so prove that like, hey, there is this place is proven that this is only for the business. I don't watch TV in there. I don't really go in there to just like mess around or whatever. Like this is meant for the business. Then we have that conversation. But the fact that it's an apartment, yeah. But the fact that like it's specifically in an apartment, I think that gets really tricky. And I'm not sure if that has much grounds.
There's an attached terrace that is my space for painting. But
Sure,
yeah.
absolutely. I would then prefer you to talk to a
It would
CPA.
sound, though, like with his garage space, that would be doable, that he should be able to.
Well, I guess I was under the presumption that you owned the home, or?
Yeah.
Okay, so that's just a better claim to make versus just an apartment, like under apartment management or so on. So yeah, I would just prefer you to talk to a CPA about that at that point. As you can see, like I can't give you full answers, and so I gotta refer you immediately to someone else real quick.
You can think about it as the owner of that apartment already gets the deduction, and IRS doesn't like double deductions.
Yeah.
So since you're leasing the space, you probably can't deduct any of the space. But anything you pay for, like internet, electricity, anything that you're paying for that's not that they don't own, could go on your list of deductions. But again, if your standard deduction is higher than you adding up all the deductions for the year for the
Yeah.
cost of doing your art
Yeah.
business, go with the standard deduction.
Okay.
There you go. Okay, is there anything else?
And if you're married, you get double standard deduction.
There you go. Okay, so actually with that, so something that I'm educating a lot of people on is that for some reason I'm finding with a lot of my generation, so like we're talking about like 20s, 30s or so on, is that the trend is like, hey, let's not get married, like, and so on. It's like we're just gonna stay girlfriend and boyfriend or so on, and we're just never gonna file either married or so on. And I will say like, well, your personal affairs, like I will say that like if you guys don't think you're a good fit, not married or so on. But what I want to mention is that what I want you guys to know when it comes to the IRS, there's mainly three things the IRS really, really loves because they think that it's just going to benefit the economy. It's going to be family, business, and property. If you have any mix of those, man, they give you deductions because, hey, you're creating all these different really great events or taxable events or different assets or so on that ultimately help the economy or so on. So yes, like even doing anything like head of household or married file jointly or so on, you get more deductions. You get more credit eligibility for all these different things purely just for having X, Y, and Z. And so having a home, you can entertain just different things, having a business, property, or so on. And so I do want to emphasize that just owning stuff, the IRS does like that you own stuff. And they'll just like, hey, you're just building capital, building assets for the economy. That's awesome. Yeah. Anything else, Al? All right, that's all I got for you guys. Okay.
Curtis. Thank you all for coming. If you haven't been here before, you want to look around, I'll be over here. I can show you around the building, but otherwise, we'll go around, hang out, and I'll see y'all next time, okay?